Hello, everybody. My name is Leandro Paladino, speaking to you from Argentina. I hope that if you're listening to this on the 20th of April, 2024, you're having a wonderful time at the paradigm shift across borders. Technology and conference formats allow for me to leave this recording for you, since I'll be coming back from another conference in Brighton, England myself on the 20th of April, and I'm glad that I can contribute to the conference in this way. Thank you, Star Scholars, for having me present about a topic that I'm very interested in. In fact, I became rather fascinated with translanguaging several years ago doing my master's in bilingual education with the University of Birmingham. And I've been exploring it ever since. I made it the focus of my master's dissertation, and then I watched it evolve, and the concept also matured in me, like every concept that we first learn about rather superficially, and then we start exploring different nuances. First things first, translanguaging as a social construct goes back way before we even had words to talk about it. If you're familiar with a bilingual or multilingual family, then you know how comfortable the family members feel coming and going quite flexibly and possibly creatively between two or more languages. Now, as a pedagogical construct, translanguaging is attributed to Ken Williams, doing work in Wales, providing his students with a dual language education in Welsh and English. It's impossible to talk about translanguaging without mentioning Ofelia Garcia, one of the scholars who made the term well-known and widespread, and who defined it in 2009 as multiple discursive practices in which bilinguals engage in order to make sense of their bilingual worlds. So you see, this includes the social and the pedagogical. Part of the reason why translanguaging is complex and sometimes generates disagreements or misunderstandings is that it is different to look at it as a social and as a pedagogical process, although, of course, the literature and the research in one and other area can certainly enrich each other. Collins Baker defined it as the dynamic and simultaneous existence of different languages in communication, which makes for a close interrelationship between languages. Part of the challenge of looking at translanguaging is that it can mean very different things, or it can have very different applications, depending on whether you are in a context such as Argentina, for example, where English is typically learned as one more subject, so to speak. So sometimes English as a foreign language has been the term to refer to it. Whether you are a non-US person living in the United States, for example, and so you learn English as a second language, a common acronym in the United States. EAL is a common acronym in England and in other parts of the world that often includes immigrants, asylum seekers, and pupils and families of a refugee background. So it's always important, if you read about translanguaging, if you talk about it, that you think about the context that you're talking about. The word foreign has often been critiqued as well, because it generates this otherness that is a bit exclusive rather than inclusive. Fortunately, we've also got the term ELT, English language teaching, for those of us that work in EFL/ESL.
Hello everyone, how are you today? Today for art, you're...
This is Lauren, a South African teacher that works in my school. Of course, I've got her permission to use this video. It's a video that I've kept from the pandemic. Here, Lauren is giving instructions to a group of 5- and 6-year-olds. She was sending this video home. So although there are no children present, so this does not reflect the reality of most classrooms, I've always kept it as what I think is a very good example of a teacher coming and going from one and another language quite comfortably, as you will see. Pay attention to how she uses either language. If you believe in note-taking, make a quick note as to whether she performs different communicative acts in one language and another. How does she say hello? How does she give the initial instruction, etc., etc.? Are there words that she repeats in one language or another, or bits of English in longer Spanish stretch, or vice versa, bits of Spanish in a longer English stretch?
Hello everyone, how are you today? Today for art, you're going to need a paper towel, a serviette, colored pens, and water in a spray bottle. No sé si van a poder ver, pero este paper towel tiene muchos puntitos. Y yo voy a llenar esos puntitos con colors. Okay, once I've filled my paper towel with colored dots, I'm going to put it inside a bandeja and spray water on it y observar qué pasa con los colors. Are you ready? Well, I hope you have fun exploring with little dots, paper towels, and water at home. Bye everyone, see you next week.
Very interesting, isn't it? Now, I'm not presenting this as a perfect example of anything. There are no perfect examples. It's a real teacher giving real instructions to a real group of students. And I'd like to analyze a little bit what we can call the translanguaging idiolect, each teacher's own use of the language, including translanguaging. Let's watch again, bit by bit, making a few comments.
Hello everyone, how are you today? Today for art, you are going to need a paper towel, a serviette, colored pens, and water in a spray bottle. No sé.
So she says hello in English and the initial instruction is in English, but did you notice that she says paper towel and then resorts to a near synonym, which is a Spanish cognate? She knows that her students will recognize the word serviette more because it is similar to Spanish. Now a clarification in Spanish, possibly for parents who were also watching this video and helping from home, for example, in the time of the pandemic.
No sé si van a poder ver, pero este paper towel tiene muchos puntitos.
So paper towel, she repeats in English, and colors, she repeats in English. Content obligatory language, as it's sometimes called. The key words that are fundamental to the topic that you are talking about or that you're dealing with has been referred to as content obligatory language, which in this case, Lauren, reinforces in English as a target language, if you will. And then there's also content compatible language, words in the periphery that contribute to the content but are not necessarily so essential as, for example, paper towel and colors, which Lauren chooses as her own content obligatory language in this case.
Y yo voy a llenar esos puntitos con colors. Okay, once I've filled my paper towel with colored dots, I'm going to put it inside a bandeja and spray water on it y observar qué pasa con los colors.
This is a very interesting example of what we can call micro-alternation in translanguaging. Micro-alternation including intrasentential translanguaging, including single words of another language within a sentence, and then intersentential, that is across clauses or sentences using bits of different languages.
Are you ready? Well, I hope you have fun exploring with little dots, paper towels, and water at home. Bye everyone, see you next week.
The closing is fully in English, possibly because she knows it's all been quite clear. This has been defined sometimes as language in action, when the language really accompanies action rather than being self-standing or abstract. Did you notice how she does little dots, paper towel, and water? So how she resorts to the gestural mode to accompany the content obligatory language, which in this case will be, for example, the ingredients or the elements that she needs to carry out this activity. I find it to be a wonderful example of translanguaging. If you want to have the video, you can contact me. I'll be sharing my information at the end, and I can willingly, happily pass on the video as well as a presentation to you. So this micro-alternation that I was talking about, that can be both intrasentential and intersentential, is complemented with the macro-alternation between two or more languages, which in a school can mean, do you have different spaces where one language predominates, actual physical classrooms or playgrounds, etc.? Are there moments of the day when one or another language predominates? Are there people that use one language more than another? Of course, the micro and the macro become one, and there's a continuum between the two. But I think they can be two good points for you to think about your teaching practice or your supervision practice if you're a director or a head. Speaking of that, concrete tips then, if you're a teacher, observe yourself, record yourself with audio or with video, get a colleague to observe you, and try and find patterns. Do you use more of one language or another at different moments of the day or lesson? More on Monday than on Friday, for some reason, which you will identify maybe after gathering some data? What happens with the students? Do they use one or another language more at one moment than another, for some communicative act more than for another? Do teamwork with other teachers in other schools and compare results. Explore multimodality. Can you have one language in the written format and another language in the spoken format? Can you have multilingual posters? With today's technology, multimodality allows for a lot of flexibility and creativity in multiple modes of communication to make things accessible and to scaffold content for our students, including sign languages as well. And if you're a head, you can make it your job to help each teacher develop their own translanguaging idiolect, talking about it, for example, after you've done observations, involving every stakeholder in the community. Ideally, develop a written language policy, because these policies are typically implied, but it's interesting to involve everybody, not just do it yourself as a director, to develop a school-wide policy, including how many languages are spoken in a school. Have you got students and families from other backgrounds, and what are their home languages, etc., and then see what you can do within the school with information that you can get about languages which our students may use outside of the school as well. Whether you're a teacher or a head, you can employ a simple WH framework to do the analysis. Which languages should be considered? You make a list, and you try to sound this information of how those languages are used by students and families. What is being done at home, outside of the school, and inside of the school? Playground language, if you've got special moments of the day, what is being done with each of those languages? What about the where and the when, the places and the times? You can also make a list and do a bit of research into that. Who uses each of the languages? How? And most importantly, why? At the bottom of the analysis, why are we doing things the way that we are doing them? Is it simply tradition? Is it because I've always heard that we should try and pretend that our students haven't got any home languages, any first languages? So I act in the way that I've always heard that things should be done, rather than critically reassess practices and policies. This is not interactive, so I can only imagine questions that are frequently present in discussions around translanguaging, such as, is it the same as translation? Is it the same as code switching? What debates are there around translanguaging? Translanguaging is clearly not the same as translation. Lauren's video was a very good example of it. She didn't say things in one language and then translate. In fact, she practically didn't translate at all. If anything, most scholars will agree, I think, that translation can be one of several resources that multilinguals have at their fingertips when it comes to flexibly coming and going between one code and another. Very simply, because a lot can be said about this, code switching has been said to put the focus more on the codes themselves, on the individual languages, whereas translanguaging puts the focus more on the users of the languages. In fact, recent positions in translanguaging have to some extent denied the existence of separate languages, saying that the named languages, Spanish, English, Portuguese, have developed more in the interests of nation states developing the national identity of their own territories, but not necessarily in the mind of bilinguals and multilinguals, in which there is a common underlying proficiency, as Jim Cummins defined it, not separate boxes called English and French and English in our heads as language users, in the way that we do use socially. So there's quite a lot of debate around this at the moment. Anything by Ophelia Garcia is something worth reading. By Colin Baker, this wonderful book that is a very good summary of everything important in bilingual education and bilingualism, including references to translanguaging. This book reflects the current debate because all the articles that Jeff McSwan has edited here accept every precept of translanguaging as such, except this idea that there are no named languages, which in their view is a denial of a lot of relevant research in sociolinguistics, including a certain denial of code switching, which, if you look at Ophelia Garcia's earlier work, she included and embraced the concept of code switching in her work in, let's say, the first decade of this century, but then later on, in the company of other scholars, she changed her position to some extent and started, well, really denying to some extent the concept of code switching. And this final book, this is a bit unfair because there's so much good literature, but just to show how here we've got yet another acronym, ESOL and TESOL, and a wonderful collection of articles in which translanguaging is viewed from a TESOL perspective. What I hope I've done in the past 20 minutes is reviewed terms and realities and debates to do with translanguaging, however superficially and quickly. Looked at translanguaging in practice with that very good video of Lauren giving arts instruction to her students, giving you tips, whether you're a teacher or a director, about how you can move forward in translanguaging, and suggested some reading. I hope that whether you're an experienced teacher with translanguaging or whether the construct is still relatively new to you, that this short presentation has given you a few ideas about the concept. Thank you very much in a translanguaged manner. And that's the Instagram account where I share things that I do, work and study mostly. So please free to follow me there if you want to see the work that I'm doing. A YouTube channel where I've got interviews and webinars like this that you're invited to visit and subscribe to if you want, and then my email account and LinkedIn as well, in case you want to stay in touch and taking me up on anything that I've said today. If there's anything that you'd like to discuss any further, well, I'm more than happy to stay in touch wherever you may be in the world. Bye for now. Thank you.